Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Vanessa walked through the streets of the city, keeping behind the backs of passers-by. For the first time in her life, she was a grown family woman following a man. And that man was her husband, Andrew. Was Jenna right? A coworker from work who lived near the place said she'd seen Andrew in a restaurant with a girl a couple times. Handsome, blonde, long-legged, stylish couple discussing something animatedly. Sometimes the lady cheerfully stroking Andrew on the shoulder. The dates were wrong, Vanessa asserted confidently. Between her and Andrew, there had always been a trusting, close relationship. They shared each other's joys and worries, told each other how the day had gone. No, of course, Jenna was wrong. She'd only seen the man a couple times in her life, so she confused him with someone else. Jenna was skeptical of marriage in general. The woman had met Andrew practically right in front of her eyes. And Jenna then confidently declared that the relationship had no prospects. Oh, friend, I'd be careful not to get enchanted before you're disappointed. Been there, done that. It hurts afterwards. Vanessa realized that there was some truth in what her colleague said. But next to Andrew, she felt so loved, so protected. He looked at her with loving tenderness, protected her, tried to please her. It could not be a deception. It wasn't a deception either. Declared in response to Vanessa's objections, the much-experienced Jenna. Now he really feels that you are the woman of his life. Love period, all that sort of thing. But time will pass. He will look at the situation with sober eyes and realize everything. Vanessa realized that maybe her friend was right. Andrew was so perfect, so handsome. The turquoise eyes on his tanned face alone are worth it. And those dimples on his cheeks that appear when Andrew smiles. Vanessa was ready to admire his smile endlessly. She had never felt that way about anyone before. Andrew, a lead engineer at a major oil company. He has nearly 100 people under him of intelligent, determined acumen. The man had a prestigious university under his belt. He was persuaded to stay in the capital. He didn't want to leave his hometown. His parents are already quite elderly here. Andrew is their only and very late child. The man could not leave his father's mother alone. So he came back, which, in his own words, he has never regretted. Andrew's parents are wealthy people. His father was once a big businessman by the standards of their city. He had his own dairy, which was once very profitable. Before that, the man was in the restaurant business in New York. But after the birth of his child, he decided to change his line of work. The family moved from the capital to a quiet provincial town with a developed infrastructure, but much more pleasant ecology. Always thought that children are more pleasant and easier to raise in small towns. This is how Anna, Andrew's mother, talked about the move many years ago. Vanessa had a perfect relationship with the Candles in spite of silly stereotypes. In a way, they replaced her parents, although they were more like grandparents in age. Her own. Vanessa remembered her mother and father vaguely. They had died when the girl was only 5 years old. They went to the forest for mushrooms, got confused. They were searched, then searched for a long time. But the Taita is dangerous and unpredictable. Vanessa's mom and dad joined the list of people missing in the forests. There were a lot of such cases then. And even now, such cases are not rare. Anyway, little Vanessa was taken in by her grandmother, her paternal grandmother. She raised her granddaughter, tried to give her everything she needed. Vanessa adored her grandmother. But when the girl was only 20 years old, her only relative was gone. Heart age, Vanessa was left all alone. And so wanted the love of support of a close person next to her. That's probably why she contacted Mark. At first, he seemed like perfection. When the tragedy happened, the girl was in her 3rd year at the University of Economics. She got there thanks to her grandmother. From childhood, she had taught her granddaughter that she should learn to strive for a better life. Their small family, according to Vanessa, was not poor. At least, they certainly did not starve. But the grandmother kept lamenting that she could not take her granddaughter, show, and big cities other countries. The girl did not understand these worries, not quite satisfied with her life. I then in my time traveled around the world thanks to work. The old woman persuaded me. She worked as a train conductor all her life and visited many interesting places. Grandma loved to reminisce about those happy times, and her granddaughter just loved her stories. Well, what are your years it will still be? Vanessa was perplexed. But what is so interesting about traveling? Well, yes, grandmother tells quite fascinating. But why be upset that there is no money for traveling now? You can watch all that stuff on TV. Then, when Andrew showed Vanessa the world, she realized what Grandma meant. It was only a pity to share it with a relative, impressions Vanessa could no longer share. Andrew, this is the best gift that fate has given Vanessa. He literally changed the life and outlook of a woman. Next to her spouse, she always felt at peace. They have already been together for so many years, and nothing has changed. All the same tenderness, admiration. Both have become each other's kin. They haven't been hurt by the household as many mourned. Andrew still looks at his wife with love. He still tries to surprise and please her. The prophecies of acquaintances about the futility of this relationship, including Jenna's predictions, did not come true, or they did. Maybe it is now that Vanessa will recognize her husband. On the other hand, why was he out on the street at this time? Andrew's supposed to be home taking care of their sick son. What's he doing here? Probably in a hurry to meet that hot blonde Jenna told me about. He's about to find out. The woman's heart pounded, starting to give her a headache. She was used to trusting her husband with everything. And now, following him through the streets of the city, she felt a mixture of the most contradictory feelings. Anxiety, excitement, shame, guilt, all at once. Vanessa didn't understand what her husband was doing now in the center of the city, but she knew he should be at home at this moment looking after little Frank. One of the twins was sick and didn't go to daycare today. Vanessa didn't have a chance to take a sick day. She's busy at work, with a report and an inspection coming in. But Andrew, he was able to work remotely from home today. What was a man supposed to be doing right now? Work and look after his son at the same time. But for some reason, he's here rushing down the wide street somewhere, and Vanessa follows him to uncover his secret at last. If it was something work-related, Andrew would surely call his wife, warn her and tell her who he left Frank for. The baby's only 3 years old. He can't be home alone yet. Plus, he had a high fever this morning. No. Andrew is a sensitive and caring father. He adores his children and would never leave any of them in danger. Surely there's someone with Frank right now, a nanny or a grandmother. Andrew's mother. But why doesn't she know about this? And why would Andrew be here in the center of town? His company's office is about 10 kilometers away, and Andrew looks kind of strange. The man always wears pants and a shirt to work. There's a strict dress code. Now Andrew's wearing jeans and a t-shirt. And Vanessa couldn't remember any of these things in her husband's closet. Either something new, or on the contrary, old and therefore long forgotten. Strange, of course, Andrew never liked jeans and t-shirts. He preferred other, not bright colors. Now he was wearing an orange polo. That made it even more confusing. Vanessa followed her husband's footsteps, noting all the new strange details of the stumpy sneakers of an unknown brand. That's odd. Her husband favored name brands, not out of snobbery. No, that wasn't in the man's character at all. Despite his high salary and brilliant career, he was simply more comfortable in branded quality shoes. Where did he get those sneakers from the market? And Andrew looked subtly different. Different look, light stubble, but usually shaved face and tiredness. But of course, it was Andrew. Vanessa would recognize her husband in any image, the light spring, the gestures, the gait, the beautiful, swarthy skin tone, the bright turquoise eyes that once surrounded a woman's head. She still often admired them. Andrew kept walking forward. Vanessa followed him. Why did he go on foot? Her husband usually traveled by car. He wasn't particularly fond of walking. Vanessa was already long late for work since lunch, came out of the office to have a snack, suddenly noticed her husband, and of course, hurried after him. No big deal. She warned Svetlana that she would think of something to say to her superiors. It wasn't the first time the friends had helped each other out. So Jenna, she's got nothing to worry about. Finally, Andrew pulled into one of the restaurants, which were plentiful on both sides of the main street. Vanessa froze. Jenna's words that she had seen her husband in a cafe with a beautiful blonde were going over and over in her head. A coworker friend had told her about it just the other day. Vanessa was then sure that Jenna was mistaken. After all, Jenna at one time she did not believe to the last that Vanessa with Andrew everything will work out. About what the friend repeatedly stated out loud. Jenna's own experience showed that it was simply impossible. Andrew is handsome, promising, wealthy, young, and free. And she's Vanessa too, of course, beautiful. You can't argue with that, but she's still a different bird. She lives in a cramped, one-room apartment inherited from her grandmother. She works in a small firm as an economist for pennies. And most importantly, she's raising her daughter alone. Who needs someone else's child? Is such a prince a match for a lady with a trailer? Question Jenna. She'll go out for a walk. And I wouldn't count on a serious thing if I were you. The words of my colleague sounded quite logical and convincing. Indeed, why would Andrew want someone else's child? And his parents would probably object. At that time, Vanessa was not yet acquainted with her mother-in-law and could not even imagine how happy they would be with Emily and her daughter. Emily, yet meeting Mark had a positive side to it. He had given her the priceless gift of a beautiful, healthy daughter and just vanished from her life. His commitments gravitated toward family life. The guy wasn't ready. Well, you can't blame him for that. Leaving the baby was entirely Vanessa's decision, and it wasn't an easy decision. The woman still shuddered at the desperate situation she found herself in almost 13 years ago. Vanessa was only a few steps away from the biggest mistake of her life. It was logical and easier for her to have an abortion at that time. What a blessing that a very young Vanessa didn't. Rainier had already turned 12. Tall, slender, big eyes. Outwardly, she resembles Mark, but no one is in the least bit upset about it. Mark, what can be said? He is a real beauty, dark almond, colored eyes, black, shiny hair. There was a touch of Oriental blood in him. Black cheekbones, well-defined lips. All of this was passed on to Emily. She was already a teenage girl. When Vanessa went out with her daughter, she often caught glances from boys and even older guys in the arena. Just a little longer, and her daughter would blossom into a beautiful young woman. The thought that she might not have been at all. Vanessa sometimes had goosebumps running down her spine. When her grandmother died, Vanessa was left all alone. On her passport, she had long since been an adult of 20 years as Vanessa, but in fact, the girl felt almost like a child. Her grandmother always took care of her, cooked delicious meals for her granddaughter, calmed her down, even woke them up in the morning for university. She wrapped Vanessa with care and love as a warm, cozy blanket. And now the girl was unbearably cold and homesick, and scared. Vanessa missed her grandmother desperately. She cried a lot during that difficult period. In public, of course, she kept to herself, but at home, she let her feelings out, sobbing, reading her grief. The realization that she was all alone frightened her and even drove her into a panic. How to live in the world if you are not needed and not interesting to anybody? If you do not need a reliable shoulder of your favorite person. And just at that moment she met Mark, dark-haired, good-looking guy who worked part-time as a janitor. Always cheerful and smiling and energetic and agile. Always positive. Vanessa noticed, of course, that the young janitor looked back at her when she was coming home from the steam. But guys like that, they probably don't miss a skirt at all. After a while, Mark began to greet Vanessa and smile broadly. It was to her that the girl could not stay sad and sorrowful. At times like this, Mark's smile was too infectious. No one could resist. As if imperceptibly in the girl arose sympathy for this guy. Their relationship had grown to the point where they sometimes talked about things around the house. Now Vanessa knew that Mark had come here from the village. His family was there. He served in the army, went to college, but money is scarce. His parents are not wealthy, to say the least. So he works part-time. Mark knew a lot of things about Vanessa too. For example, the fact that she lived all alone and that the girl studied in a prestigious university of economics. One day, Mark asked Vanessa out on a date. The girl was taken aback by such an offer. Mark was clearly very embarrassed, blushing, stammering, looking down at his feet. It was not at all like the conversation of a cheerful young man. And that's why it looked especially sweet and touching. Of course she didn't. Mark didn't have the money. So the young people went to the embankment, walked, talked, held hands, then kissed. Vanessa felt herself drawn more and more to Mark. He was so nice, so interesting. He had just turned 22. But in his years, he had seen and learned so much that some of them had never even dreamed of. Her life was relatively quiet and prosperous, whereas Mark had to work from the age of 11 to help the family and the army to pass, and in trouble. Serious get in and get out of them. Constant adventures. Mark walked Vanessa home to the driveway. The girl suddenly realized that she didn't want to part with him at all, but she didn't dare to invite him to her place. Then she didn't. Later, Mark did move in with her, and Vanessa was happy with him for a long time, almost 2 years. Mark masterfully fried potatoes and scrambled eggs and cleaned the apartment in a flash. All this guy did much better than Vanessa, who was raised like a princess by her grandmother, because she cherished and pitied him. And he also knew how to fix faucets and repair furniture. Life had taught him all that. Most of Vanessa's time was taken up with studying. Mark, on the other hand, was not particularly in need of science. He was listed in the construction technician's office, but he hardly ever showed up. He preferred to make money there. However, it was not so good either. Mark's casual earnings and a part-time janitor's salary and Vanessa's social scholarship. That's all there was to the budget. Had to save money on everything. It was a little frustrating for the guy, as he wanted a beautiful life. But Vanessa was happy as it was. The main thing is that Mark is a loving person, so sensitive, so understanding. He always knew when Vanessa needed support and gave it to her. The guy was never stingy with words and generously bestowed the girl with compliments, from which she melted. But Mark often went out with friends without Vanessa, and she didn't mind because she had no time to go out anyway, because she had a lot of projects to do at school. Sometimes, though, when I looked at Vanessa going to her friends, I was jealous. I wondered if there were any girls there, and Mark is so handsome, so sociable. Who can resist him? But the guy assured that he didn't notice anyone but Vanessa, and he didn't need anyone at all. He's happy as he is. It's just friends. Guys will sit and talk. It's like a relaxation for us guys, you know? Vanessa nodded, but still stayed home, not with a calm heart. Her intuition told her that not everything was as smooth as Mark said. But the girl consciously drowned out that weak inner voice. 2 years flew by like a day. Vanessa was already in her final year of college. Mark was also finishing his technical degree. Soon they would both be professionals, able to get jobs. And then at last, there would be no need to save money on the essentials. Maybe even a trip to the sea. That would be wonderful. One February morning, Vanessa realized she was expecting a baby. Of course, she and Mark hadn't planned any children yet. They were still on their own 2 feet, barely getting by. But an unplanned pregnancy is not an exceptional case. It happens quite often. Vanessa's not the first, and she won't be the last. People manage somehow, and yet the girl was scared. She even had sweat on her back when she looked at the test with 2 strips, which she made to know for sure. How Mark would react. Probably scared at first, too. But he's so all spry, so experienced. The guy's certainly not gonna lose it. He will say that everything will be fine, will support, as always, will smile his trademark smile, and Vanessa will immediately feel calm. Except Mark's reaction was very different. A child. The guy even recoiled from Vanessa. After hearing the news, what kind of baby would he be sure of? Surely 2 tests came back positive. This is such a bad time. You understand, don't you? Vanessa nodded. Of course, she understood everything perfectly. But what to do if this little man was already living under her heart? She felt frustrated and resentful. She thought Mark's reaction would be very different. The money for the abortion had to come from somewhere. The guy was talking to himself, as if to himself. Should I borrow it from Alex? Hearing the scary word, Vanessa was startled. What are you talking about? The girl instinctively grabbed her still absolutely flat stomach, as if protecting it. This was something she had never even thought of. Nico. Mark pulled himself together and spoke in a gentle yet firm voice. You realize we're not in a position to be parents right now, don't you? What can we give to this baby? Are we breaking bread for water right now? We're about to get our diplomas. You can go work construction. I'll get maternity pay. We'll manage. Vanessa thought it was Mark who would comfort her and say those very words. But as it happened, she had to take the initiative in her own hands. The news of the baby had thrown Mark completely off balance. Of course, he would later be ashamed of his cowardice phrases. Nothing they never reproach him for them, though it was certainly very hurtful to hear. Mark convinced Vanessa over and over again that they could not keep the baby. Painting depressing pictures of the future, he said he wasn't ready for such responsibility. And the girl suddenly, at some point, gives in to his persuasion. He's right about everything. They have no money. They haven't even learned yet. They're cramped in a small one-bedroom, and then there's the baby. The baby needs a lot of money, diapers, medicines, clothes, from which the infant grows at a breakneck speed. And she will not be able to work for a long time. When the child grows up and goes to the garden, no one will need such a specialist without experience. And she will have to throw her diploma on the shelf and work as a cleaner or a cashier in a supermarket. Is this the future we dreamed of? Mark asked. Are you worthy of more? Maybe I do need to see a doctor. Sadly, Vanessa sighed. After being carefully handled by the talented manipulator Mark, she had seen no other way out then. The guy's influence had worked. He had gotten his way. Good girl, shown Mark. We'll still have the baby. Don't worry. In a few years, we'll give him all the nice clothes, toys, his own room. But now is not the time. Vanessa called the clinic that same day and made an appointment for the procedure. Then she was in a desperate situation and thought she was doing everything right. In the morning, the girl went to the hospital with a heavy heart. In her bag, she had all the necessary things she had been told to take with her: slippers, gown, tape. Vanessa will have to spend the whole day in the hospital and will be released home only by evening. And that was if all was well. There was a line at the emergency room. Vanessa sat on a couch in the corner and looked at people for nothing. She was pounding. She could hardly contain her trembling. She wished Mark were there right now, holding her hand, stroking her back, assuring her that everything would be all right. But he was off on another part-time job. It's the right thing to do. They need the money, especially since they had to pay a large sum for this very procedure this month. Next to Vanessa sat a woman in her 40s. Well-groomed, beautiful, expensively and tastefully dressed. Exquisite manicure, fashionable haircut. Vanessa thought that she would like to look like that in 20 years, except that the woman's eyes were very sad. A man approached the woman. Probably her husband, a wealthy couple. Okay, I've done the paperwork. You'll be called soon. He put his hand on his companion's shoulder. Everything will be fine. For some reason, Vanessa immediately thought that this woman also wanted to get rid of an unwanted pregnancy. Her husband spoke the same words as Mark. It's gonna be okay. That's comforting. Really, why would they want people their age? The baby's probably an accident. In years before what could be okay, Vanessa's neighbor raised her eyes to her husband. What could be good about this whole situation? 11. Echo's fifth frozen pregnancy. Again, these painful procedures, treatment, recovery, and then all over again. You could see that the woman was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. In the eyes of her companion was so much pain, so much sympathy. He did not know how to help his wife and what to say to her words, so he just hugged her. How stupid was I? Scared then that I cannot cope. I was just finishing school. University was ahead. A career. The woman was almost whispering. My son would be 24 years old now. I knew it was a boy. I felt it right away. And now I'm paying for that mistake for the rest of my life. It's my ass. I'm right not to have any more children. It's a punishment. The man continued silently soothing his wife, stroking her back, her hair, squeezing her palms in his hands. He could not find the right words. She didn't look at the adult couple, eyes wide. She understood everything from their short dialogue. Long ago, when they were high school students, This woman had a termination of pregnancy, and now she could not have children because of its consequences. She agonizes, worries, spends a lot of money and a lot of time to realize her dream of motherhood. But it doesn't work. Vanessa suddenly realized that she will never get rid of her baby boy. She already loves it, even though it's just a cluster of cells. That's what Mark called their baby when he insisted on aborting it. Vanessa is all grown up now. She's almost finished university. With her diploma in her pocket and Mark by her side. Vanessa is not alone. Together they'll make it. The girl ran out of the clinic as if chased by a pack of dogs. People looked at her in surprise. Once outside, Vanessa breathed a sigh of relief. She felt as if she had just escaped a great misfortune. Vanessa put her hand on her stomach and smiled. Her baby was with her, and that little girl. In that moment, Vanessa realized clearly that what she had under her heart was not a cluster of cells, but her daughter, beloved, beautiful, healthy. They would meet in 7 months. Mark didn't like Vanessa's story, but it wasn't serious, he said flatly. I'll take you to the clinic tomorrow. You shouldn't have left. It was the first time they'd had an argument. Vanessa insisted on her own way. Mark was proving her wrong. His arguments had seemed so logical and right before. Now Vanessa wondered how she had ever agreed with them. Yes, it will be difficult for us. For a while, the girl said, but we're both very mature. We can handle it. I can't take that step. Finally, Mark slammed the door and walked out into the dark March evening. Vanessa thought he would cool down, come back with an apology. After all, Mark had always understood her so well before. The same would happen now. But Mark didn't show up until the morning. Drunk with aggression, he began to insist again that the child must be gotten rid of. I have a right to decide that too. And it's only Vanessa who concerns me. It was impossible to change her mind now. And the boy quickly realized that. He was a good judge of character. They hardly spoke to each other during this period. Vanessa asked the guy some questions, but he didn't dignify her with answers. He only came home to spend the night. And not always. Nico hoped that time would pass, and the man she loved would get used to the idea that he would soon become a father. Everything will be fine. Between them, after all, such a warm and close relationship. Of course, they will make up sooner or later. Mark will realize everything. He'll be ashamed. But one day, coming home from university, Vanessa found that Mark's things were not at home. The girl realized at once. She'd hoped in vain that her boyfriend would be supportive. She had wrongly thought that he just needed time to get used to the situation. Mark wasn't going to take responsibility for the baby. Nikon wasn't likely to love her that much either. Not at that moment. Much later, the girl suddenly realized that Mark had been using her. Living in her apartment. Rent in their city is not a cheap service. Mark's earnings were obviously not enough for such an expensive pleasure. Besides, no one took care of him, cooked for him, washed and ironed his clothes and cleaned. Mark lived on everything. This at first he amazed not his culinary talents and household network, but then the constant fatigue from the supposedly hard work and going out with friends. As if unnoticeably, Vanessa took the whole household on her shoulders and was happy that she was doing something for the person she loved. And yet Vanessa tried to find him. How is it? Gone, vanished, didn't even say goodbye. That's not right. Anyway, the baby Vanessa's carrying, the baby needs a father. But it turns out Mark's been a dropout for almost 2.5 years. That's the news. So Mark's been spending his time in the middle of school in the middle of nowhere. Wow, what a masterful liar he is. He was so convincing when he said he was going to his classes, but he wasn't. One of the guys from, hearing by chance that Nicholas would find out about Mark, approached her himself. You, Mark, are not looking for anything yet. He clarified. Vanessa nodded at him. Well, I thought so. It's a rare name. I don't think so. We've got a lot of Marks here. Tell me what happened. He was head over heels in love. Then he borrowed a nice sum of money and ran away. No, the shocked girl shook her head. He just disappeared. We lived together for almost 2 years. Everything was fine. We lived in your apartment, probably at your expense. I don't think he was paying for anything. Vanessa suddenly realized the guy was right. Mark earned, of course, from time to time, but he spent his money mostly on himself. Stylish clothes, gadgets. Vanessa bought occasionally inexpensive flowers or fruit baskets. The girl was so happy with this attention, and so happy that there was a favorite person next to her, that she simply did not notice the obvious. The guy's right. Mark has been living off her. If you look at the situation sober, something like that, but not quite. Not really. Mark still cooked the occasional nice dinner, fixed things around the house. Always wondered how Vanessa was doing. If so, according to the judge, he was giving something too, not just taking. Not really, the boy mumbled thoughtfully. Well, anyway, you're glad he's out of your life. He's an opportunist, a cleaning fish, a beggar from the village, unwilling to study and work, but dreaming of a beautiful life. From the outside, it was clearly visible how he sought to be friends with guys from wealthy families and daughters of rich parents, to pull resources from them. At first, he succeeded, but then everyone in tech realized who he was, and his tricks didn't work here anymore. But there's plenty of majors outside of college, so Mark went hunting elsewhere. And then he was expelled from here for failing grades. Vanessa flapped her eyes, trying to digest what she had heard. But I'm not the daughter of rich parents, quite the opposite. I have an apartment and no permanent source of income. Vanessa thought and nodded. There you go. I'm sorry, of course. But it's written all over your face that you're naive and inexperienced. It would be a piece of cake to fool someone like that. Mark had no place to live. Why are you picking on you? Lived a little in a safe harbor, not thinking about the fact that there's no money to pay the rent. Confidently, all the while he continued his hunt. Vanessa thought for a moment. Yes, indeed. Mark often disappeared with some of his friends, about whom the girl knew nothing at all. Maybe this guy was right. And now he must have found someone more suitable. So he's off into the sunset. A girl should be glad that this freeloader got away with poverty. And if suddenly, when he shows up after another failure, don't even let them on your doorstep. Here's my advice. Vanessa didn't believe this guy then because it was very hard to realize that the person you were so in love with wasn't who he pretended to be. Overcoming her natural shyness, Vanessa interviewed a few more people, choosing those who were older than high school seniors, practically graduates. And yes, some of them remembered Mark. They responded to the young man just as the first guy had. Vanessa returned home in shot feelings. It was like the ground had been knocked out from under her feet. Vanessa had a different picture in her head for 2 years. Beautiful, right. But it turns out Mark was using her. When he found out about the victim's pregnancy, the sneaky guy realized what he was up against. Liability for child support. A baby in a tiny one-bedroom. Problems for life, or at least for the first 18 years after the baby is born. Too expensive a price to pay for free housing and not so luxurious munchies, so he ran away. He's probably out of town by now. No one keeps Mark here. Then Vanessa thought about the baby, how she would raise it. Would she be able to handle it? The girl couldn't know that. But she realized one thing, even though her situation was desperate, this child would still be born to Vanessa. There wasn't a soulmate in the world. And here Vanessa's daughter felt that she was going to have a girl. Together, they would cope with all the troubles of life by themselves. And then there was a difficult, very difficult period. The diploma was the last responsible session of state exams. Vanessa studied like a curse from morning till night. She didn't think about Mark anymore. She just didn't have time. And then came the terrible toxicosis. Vanessa felt nauseous and confused. She felt dizzy all the time. But no one canceled her exams. And no one was going to make any favors for a pregnant student. Vanessa knew she had to get that diploma. She couldn't leave everything at the finish line, even though it was very hard to study in such a state. Vanessa was happy about one thing at the antenatal clinic, where she registered for pregnancy. She was told at every appointment that everything was going according to plan. The baby is healthy. It is developing as it should. These words of doctors encouraged the girl and warmed her soul. A few months flew by unnoticeably. The diploma is behind her. The state exams are passed on excellent. Vanessa is happy and proud of herself. She's done it. But what's next? The pregnancy was already past the first half. You could barely see the belly yet, so guessed slightly. But no one around had yet guessed that Vanessa was expecting a baby. The dean, after the defense of the diploma, unexpectedly invited the successful student to his office. Nico is a little surprised by this. She went up to the second floor and did not dare. Knocked on the door of the dean's office. "Come in." Vanessa saw Peter Sergeyevich behind the desk, always strict and serious. Now he was smiling broadly. Merry sparks sparkled in his eyes. "You are a wonderful student." So he began the conversation. "You have had good grades all the years, and you have performed well in the final tests. That's why I recommended that you be recruited from the factory. They need smart young economists. Do you know what the salaries are?" Of course, Vanessa knew. She never dreamed of ever getting a job there. Those who worked at the factory lived in huge new apartments and houses and drove expensive cars. In their town, the phrase factory worker even became a household name. It meant wealthy people who could not deny themselves anything. Vanessa even felt a little dizzy at the prospect, but then a daughter moved in her belly, bringing her mother back to earth. Who needs an employee without experience, who in a couple of months will go on maternity leave? It's easy to deceive, to hide a pregnancy nowadays. You can barely see your stomach, so there's no problem with that. But you'd still have to confess, hear a lot of accusations, set people up. Vanessa wasn't capable of that. Realizing that a dainty position was slipping away from under her nose, the girl almost cried. This job could solve all her problems in one fell swoop. Wanted to work. Really wanted to plunge into practice. Such was her fate. "Peter, I have something to tell you about this offer." Vanessa still had a faint hope that things would work out. Now the dean's gonna say that pregnancy is no big deal. Work for a couple of months, go on maternity leave, and then go back to the factory. They'll wait for such a promising economist. But the man, having heard the graduate's confession, gave a puzzled quack. That nothing can be done there. Is it a long-term or what? Just such offers happen once in a lifetime. It's a pity to miss the chance. Girl, you're a good economist. You'll make a great one. But I'm strapped for cash. You're needy. I can tell. I know your story, that's why I decided to help. Vanessa shook her head negatively. She understood everything the dean was saying. But there was nothing to be done. And the kid would never get rid of it for anything, even if she hadn't missed the deadline yet. The girl walked home and sobbed to her heart's content, paying no attention to the passersby regarding her. It was better that the offer had never happened. Such prospects, a completely different life. Was it hard to turn down a place like this? But she didn't want to cheat, and she didn't know how to set people up. It wasn't in her nature. In addition, Peter said that it would not have worked out for her, because when hiring a factory employee undergoes a medical examination, so it was just the way it was. She didn't calm down at home, she pulled herself together. She will have a baby, she needs to be strong. In addition, before the birth of a daughter must solve a lot of issues. The first is material. Now Vanessa will not receive a stipend to work. A girl who is about to go on maternity leave will not be taken either. But it's for a job in her specialty. And there are other positions. They do not require high qualifications, and sometimes even official registration. They don't pay much, but Vanessa needs something to live on. Not only that, just to live, she will have to save some amount of money, not to work during the period, when the daughter will be very tiny. Yes, the state provides some kind of allowance for children. Vanessa has already learned that it's a pittance. You can't live on that. And Vanessa is an honor student. She went to work as an entryway cleaner at the place where Mark used to work as a janitor. The girl ruled the stairwells in the early morning and late evening, when there were not so many people. The pay was good by Vanessa's standards. She had enough to live on and managed to save a little. Of course, the girl wasn't shocking. But after her grandmother was gone, she was used to saving money, so she didn't worry, especially about it. Physical labor suddenly turned out to be the best sedative, heavy, sad thoughts as if by themselves erased from her head. Vanessa even felt joy when instead of the dirty stairs, she saw the shining clean ground in front of her eyes. There was something soothing about it, even calming. At the same time, the girl was looking for earnings on the internet. She realized that she would not be able to wield a rag for long. The belly was growing by the hour, not by the day. It was simply impossible to hide it. And of course, it prevented her from bending over and stretching properly. And it was dangerous to carry a bucket of water. You never know. And Vanessa found another way to earn money, even more successful than the last one. And most importantly, a small child was not a hindrance. It turned out that hundreds of students across the country do not want to write term papers and essays on their own, download ready-made works. Not an option. Teachers have long known them by rote. Yes, and online verification greatly complicates the situation. Here came the demand for people who can write such works for money. They just could, and how could? She even breathed a sigh of relief when she realized that her university knowledge would help her in such a difficult situation. Vanessa quit her job because she could no longer clean entrances and went deeper into her new job, which she liked very much. The girl was afraid that during her maternity leave her knowledge would be forgotten, outdated, erased. But now she would be aware of everything that was happening in the economy. Vanessa worked and felt like pumping her professionalism. This, of course, could not help but please. The girl managed to collect enough money to prepare for her baby girl all the necessary diapers for the first time, and also bottles, overalls, decay race Vanechka. It turned out that the little man needs so much of everything. Vanessa even bought a stroller. Not a new one, of course. New ones cost like an airplane wing. She got it from a hand-me-down ad. Wonderful transportation for the princess tender pink stroller with beautiful flowers on the side. In excellent condition, by the way. In due time was born little Emily. When the baby was placed on Vanessa's chest in the hall, the young mommy even cried from the accumulated emotions. Now she is not alone. Now she is a mom. It is, of course, very difficult and responsible. But what a joy it is. Days in the maternity hospital with a little daughter turned out to be an incredibly happy time. She didn't have to work, she didn't have to clean or cook. She was invited to the canteen 5 times a day and was provided with clean diapers for her daughter every day. Beauty. Sometimes the girl would look out the window at the festive discharge parties thrown by new moms, relatives. Balloons, laughter, songs, fun, crowds, relatives, and friends. All of them joyfully welcoming the newest member of the family. Was asking mom for flowers? Vanessa smiled as she watched these scenes, but also sad, of course. No one is waiting for her like that. Only she herself is excited about Emily's arrival. But suddenly Vanessa was wrong. When the girl with such a pilot in her arms went to the porch of the maternity hospital, a small crowd was waiting for her there. A couple of classmates, a few coworkers. They were all smiling. There were flowers and balloons. Vanessa almost cried to the point of tears. The girl was put in a cab and sent home. Her friends walked her back to her apartment. Someone had to carry balloons, flowers, and packages with gifts for the baby. So Vanessa had a grand discharge, and then began the everyday life of a young mother. Nico got used to the new role as not as easy as planned before the birth. Sleepless nights, inexperience, unpredictability, her daughter's behavior, and fears. With the arrival of the baby, Vanessa has new fears that she could not even think of before. What if Emily chokes while feeding? What if the rash on the baby's body, a symptom of a terrible disease? Why is her daughter crying so much? Maybe she needs medical attention. And I had to work too, because the child's allowance seemed quite tiny. There were such moments when the young mother with one hand was nomadic daughter, and with the other hand was building another term paper, because the deadlines were pressing. Vanessa slept little during this difficult period. There was absolutely nowhere to wait for help. That's why she had to deal with the child herself, and to work, and to keep the house clean. After all, she had to go to the clinic and walk with the baby every day. Vanessa's skis slimmed down under her eyes. At that time, there were always deep shadows. She sometimes didn't even have time to sign out for the day. Curled her long tangled hair into a bump at the back of her head in the morning, hoping to tidy up her head a little later, and remembering it was past 0 o'clock. And yet, despite all these difficulties, no one has ever regretted their decision to keep the child. On the contrary, Looking at her daughter, she was sometimes horrified at what she could do. After all, she had already come to the clinic, had already taken a coup, had already decided on a terrible deed. I wonder what would not have been heard than the conversation between that woman and her husband. Vanessa chased such thoughts away from herself. Now she did not even want to think about it. Emily grew up to be a calm, trouble-free child. Everything was on time and her teeth grew when needed, and she sat up according to plan. And she went to school ahead of schedule. Vanessa had no one to talk to at home. She very much missed human contact and therefore constantly talked to her daughter. It is probably because of this that Emily spoke at an age when other children do not even try to say their first words yet. Moms on the playground, looking at the fictional cute little girl, amazed, and Vanessa's heart floods and joy and maternal pride. She has a wonderful daughter, the best. How lucky is she to have her? At the age of 2, Emily went to kindergarten. By the way, the girl very quickly got used to the new place of stay no tears, no tantrums, as if the little girl understood that there was no other way out, and did not create unnecessary problems for her mother. Emily was not even sick during the period of adaptation, like other children. Realizing that the daughter is attached to a certain, took up the search for a job in her specialty. Earnings on the internet is of course good, but still the money is small and unstable. The young mother had to save on everything, and so wanted to buy toys and beautiful dresses for her daughter, and to pamper herself at least sometimes. Vanessa had studied for 5 years for a reason. It's time to look for a job in her specialty. No more red diploma on the shelf dusty. Of course, Vanessa encountered difficulties. An employee with no experience and with a small child in her arms. Now she's going to have to take endless sick days. We know you young moms. But my daughter attends the garden for a long time and does not get sick. There's no problem with that. You all say that, or you're not suitable for us. We need someone with experience. You can't handle it. Vanessa went to job interviews like she was going to work, and everywhere she went she was met with the same thing. It was confusing. Where can I get experience if they won't take me anywhere without it? Vanessa once approached a recruiter with a direct question. The woman who conducted the interview was confused for the first few seconds. That's not my problem. And yet one day luck smiled on a girl at a furniture repair company. An economist was urgently needed. The salary offered was not particularly large, so the queue of applicants for the position was not standing. And the person was needed right now. Vanessa was hired despite her lack of experience and the presence of a small child. There was no time for such subtleties. Vanessa quickly proved herself. She did her work faithfully. Everything had time and ideas to improve accounting. The girl finally got to work in her specialty. Management, of course, quickly appreciated her zeal. The young employee was respected. She even raised her salary. We need such enthusiasts, the boss often said. Vanessa felt a pleasant warmth from these praises. A bonus to her favorite work and a good salary was communication, a team. Grown-up people. How did the girl miss all this? For 2 years, she talked only with her little daughter, and heard jokes, tea parties, exchanging news and opinions. All this was sorely missed. At the same firm, the girl met Jenna. They were almost the same age and therefore quickly became friends. Jenna often came to visit Vanessa and invited her to her house. The girl still lived with her parents. They had a lot of common topics for conversation. However, the friends' opinions on certain issues differed, which sometimes led to heated arguments. But it was also very interesting and exciting. Life got better. Vanessa worked, got good money. Now she did not have to save money on food and clothes. Vanessa even managed to save up for a summer trip to the sea with Emily. Luckily, the young mother had volunteered to go with them and Jenna. It was a wonderful vacation, which was then repeated several more times. Emily delighted in her successes. She grew up a beautiful girl, very much like Mark, but the character and learning abilities of the little girl went to her mother. Emily quickly and effortlessly learned to read, write, and count before school. She always went to kindergarten with a book. She also drew wonderfully. I could not be happy, but my treasure. But Jenna's friend didn't have a good personal life. She often went on dates, started light novels, and then shared with a friend over a glass of wine another disappointment. Maybe it's the men. Maybe they really are all assholes. Like yours. He left you with a potbelly and ran away. I don't know what to say. Vanessa shook her head. You know, I don't have much experience in these things. Maybe you're right, but Vanessa didn't really think so. She knew that there were many wonderful men in the world, kind, brave, caring. She just didn't want to argue with Jenna. She was already in a shooting mood. Of course, Vanessa sometimes thought about the fact that she needed a man next to her, a reliable shoulder, a support, a wall, behind which you can hide from the hardships of life, because pulling all alone, and it is very hard. There is no one to share her worries with. She herself would be happy to take care of this man, to surround him with love and care. And Emily would have a father who would be freaking out with her on the street and carrying the girl on his shoulders. Clearly that's not enough. Vanessa has seen the eyes her daughter uses to see off the father and little girl couples. She doesn't say anything out loud. She doesn't want to upset her mom, but Vanessa notices everything herself. But where to find such a prince? Yes, and when there's a house, a job, a daughter. Vanessa never went anywhere. Sometimes, of course, Jenna would take her out to a bar or a cafe. Emily was old enough to spend a few hours alone. But still, the woman's heart wasn't in the right place during those times. She kept thinking about how her baby was doing. I couldn't relax. What's wrong with you? Like a frying pan getting angry. Jenna, look at the way those cool guys at the next table are looking at us. They're gonna come over to meet us. You know, I should probably get going. You were always so touchy, Jenna. Whenever something interesting comes along, you just run. Jenna couldn't quite understand her friend. She hadn't had kids herself. She had no idea what it was like to worry about her blood daughter and the anxieties associated with a child she didn't know either. By the way, Jenna is still single. She has occasional stormy romances, but they all end the same way. The woman is once again disappointed in another cavalier, or he himself disappears over the horizon without explanation. When Andrew appeared in Vanessa's life, she at first did not even want to talk about it to her friend. She had just gone through a difficult breakup and was in her feelings. And here Vanessa is with her happiness. And the astute Jenna figured it all out. Are you seeing someone? Sort of. How did you know? Did your eyes give you away? Jenna grinned. Come on, tell me, who is he? How did you meet? Vanessa had to tell her friend everything. She didn't mind. I wanted to share this story with my friend. All the more so because it really turned out to be a fairy tale. Vanessa always came home at the same time. She would drive from work to school and pick up Emily from the after-school program. Together, they'd stop at the store for goodies. Then slowly, taking their time, they would take to their house. Mother and daughter shared the news of the day, discussed plans for the evening. It was wonderful. That was the time. That May evening. At first, it was business as usual. Emily was in a happy frame of mind. A long vacation, school camp, and a gift from her mother for the excellent completion of the first grade were ahead. The girl walked beside Vanessa and bounced with overflowing feelings. Vanessa smiled. She didn't even think of telling her daughter to have fun. And then a man approached them, handsome and young, his expensive branded clothes giving away his social status. He was looking directly at Vanessa and approaching her. There could be no doubt. Hello. A little confused by the young man's pronunciation. Don't be alarmed. I just don't know how to start a conversation. We need to talk. At least I do. I think it was getting. Emily looked at the stranger with curiosity, but without fear. The woman thought she was setting an example for her daughter. Not a good example. After all, so many times taught her not to talk to strangers and hear. But on the other hand, there was nothing to be afraid of. It's a busy street. Crowds of people going about their business. They're certainly not in any danger here. And this stranger evokes feelings other than fear or dislike. He's clearly embarrassed, though usually he's probably confident and self-sufficient. This behavior looks nice enough, and in general, an open look, a beautiful smile, a calm voice. Vanessa suddenly realized she was drawn to the end of it all. This is the kind of man you want to listen to. Maybe we should go to a cafe, the man suggested. I think the girl won't say no to ice cream. I won't refuse. Emily smiled at him. No, it's unnecessary, shook her head Vanessa. Realizing that the man did not know how to speak in front of a child of women, sent Emily to the nearest playground. Vanessa could see perfectly well what the daughter was doing. The girl was also peering at her mother, but she couldn't hear her conversation with the stranger now. So what did you want to talk about? The young man introduced himself as Andrew and then told her what the matter was. As he told her, Vanessa was surprised, pleased, and tried to hide a happy smile. She felt like the heroine of a romantic comedy. It turns out that Andrew is no longer in this cafe, every evening after work, and the walls there are transparent from thick backstage glass. A man, understandably during dinner, stares out into the street. In his field of vision are people hurrying about their business in the evening. And then one day he saw Vanessa and her daughter. Easy gait, a kind look. You looked at your daughter with such tenderness and looked like the Madonna and Child from the ancient paintings. I don't know how to explain it. Andrew was embarrassed and confused. But Vanessa, of course, she understood what the man was trying to say. Don't think anything of the sort. It's just that, as I understand it, you're single now, unmarried, and we can try, well, to meet, to go for a walk somewhere to socialize. I'm raising my daughter alone, that's true. But how did you figure that out? I just assumed. Andrew smiled broadly. It was obvious that Vanessa's admission that she was single pleased him very much. No ring on her finger. Besides, I've never seen you with anyone. Just you and your daughter. I've been watching you for a long time. That may sound frightening, but don't think I won't, the man assured Vanessa. Her heart fluttered joyfully and goosebumps ran up and down her back. The woman tried very hard not to show her feelings and hoped she was succeeding. You already know here, Emily and I pass by at this time every day. No wonder you see us all the time. Andrew smiled again. Yes, you're right. That's exactly how it worked out. When I see you, it makes me feel so happy, so warm. Well, now that I've said it out loud, that's why I decided to talk to mine. I think you're a wonderful person. Not many people like you. And of course, you're very beautiful. Vanessa couldn't help smiling. It had been so long since she had been complimented. It had been so long since she had felt herself admirable and loved. It was incredibly gratifying. Then the conversation flowed, somehow more naturally. Unnoticeably, Vanessa and Andrew switched to you. The man was no longer embarrassed or lost. He told a little about himself and asked Vanessa a few questions about his life. The bonding happened naturally and easily. A little later, Emily, who was playing on the playground, joined them on the bench. She diffused the situation even more with her childlike directness. As it happened, Emily and Andrew immediately found a common language. And then there were meetings, dates, sometimes with Emily, sometimes without her. Vanessa was afraid to believe that she had finally met her man. Andrew understood her, accepted and respected her opinion, and was always ready to offer help. Vanessa felt that if she turned to him with any problem, and he would solve it immediately and with the joy of being able to help. Of course, there were doubts. The story of Mark was still fresh in her mind. Though it had been many years since then, Andrew is younger. He holds a high position in a large company. His parents are very wealthy after all. Do they need a daughter-in-law like that? And Andrew himself. The man is rich, handsome, virtually flawless. He must have a lot of admirers around him, and the man wasn't exactly hiding it. Of course, I've met many women, but you're different from all of them. You're the best, sincere and honest, a little naive and gentle. There's probably no one like you anymore. I was lucky to meet you by chance. From these words, she already loved Andrew with all her heart and felt that he had no less strong feelings for her. But Vanessa still could not believe that a long and serious relationship between them was possible. People around them were adding fuel to the fire, especially Jenna Master. Disappointment with men. Those rich ones, they're always looking for someone. I've had stories like that. James, for instance. Do you remember him? Probably a businessman with a cool car. He sang in your ear, "I love him, I can't do it." Caught him, dumped him. married his father's partner's daughter. The usual story. Don't get your hopes up either. It can be painful. But things didn't work out the way Jenna had predicted. Andrew made some sort of proposal. He looked into her eyes with such concern as she was confused with surprise. What to say? Andrew then thought Vanessa was formulating a polite refusal. He himself had admitted it to her later. But the woman, she just didn't know what to do because she was confused and because she had the attitude firmly planted in her head. They're not a couple. I love you very much, Vanessa finally said. But you won't regret it later. I mean, we're not exactly equals. And I have a daughter, Do you really think so? Andrew marveled, and then he held Vanessa tightly to him. I love you. I don't need anyone else. I am happy that I noticed you once. It's the greatest gift of fate. Vanessa was bursting then with joy and surprise at the touching essence of the situation itself. It was nice to feel so valued and loved. Well, your parents won't mind. Only now I realized my omission, Andrew smiled. I should have introduced you to them a long time ago. Then such questions would not have arisen in principle. Andrew's parents turned out to be incredibly nice and smiling people. They welcomed Vanessa and Emily so warmly that the woman had no doubts. Andrew was not lying. He really wants to be her spouse. They're going to be fine. Children are a great happiness. Anna smiled. Andrew's mom looked at Emily fondly. She is so beautiful. You have a very good girl. Emily was reciprocating Andrew's father and mother with affection. If Vanessa was at first shy in the company of her mother-in-law, her 7-year-old daughter immediately found a common language with them. She needed her grandparents so much. Anna and Sam had long dreamed of grandchildren. And then there was the wedding. Not a lavish celebration with a lot of guests, but a small family holiday. It was what both the bride and groom wanted. After the newfound family, Vanessa, Andrew, and Emily flew to the warm sea. It was a wonderful joint vacation full of sun, fun, pleasant surprises. And then family life began in Andrew's big apartment. The life has quickly settled down. Everything went in its own way. After only a couple of months, it seemed that it was always like that. 2 years after the wedding, the family was enriched with 2 new members. Vanessa gave birth to twins. Frank and Peter were so funny, so cute. They quickly became everyone's favorites. Anna, Vanessa's mother-in-law, loved taking care of the babies. The happy grandmother came to the apartment of the young family almost every day to help her daughter-in-law. 2 babies at once. It's no joke. She was often accompanied by Sam's husband. That too did not dote on the children and constantly invented some fun games. When Grandpa came to visit, there was always squealing and laughter in the apartment. Vanessa enjoyed these visits. Andrew turned out to be not only a wonderful husband, but also a caring father. And the man made no distinction between Emily and his sons. He paid equal attention to all of them. Time passed, the boys grew up and went to kindergarten. Vanessa was finally able to return to work. Of course, there was no need for money as before. But the woman loved what she was doing. Besides, she liked the team and socializing. She did not want to become a housewife at all, although Andrew had suggested it many times. Vanessa explained her decision to her husband, and he, as always, understood her. She and Andrew have been together for 6 years now, and these years have changed Vanessa a lot. She became more calm, more feminine, more peaceful. How could it be otherwise when you're with a man you never even dreamed of? He's so unbelievably good at everything. But now Vanessa suddenly runs through the streets of the city after her ideal husband, who apparently is in a hurry to meet his mistress. The woman did not believe Jenna's words when she said that she had seen Andrew several times in a cafe with a spectacular lady. Vanessa felt sorry for her friend. She so desperately wanted what she herself had for a husband. Children, a strong family. Vanessa knew that Jenna was a little jealous of her and thought her words about Andrew were either fiction or a mistake. But here he was, Andrew, strangely dressed, unshaven, very tired, going on and on when he should be at home with the baby. Here, at last, is the restaurant. The man walked in there, didn't wait for a while so he wouldn't run into his husband at the door. Then he slipped into the establishment as well. The woman chose the far corner, a table bookmarked with a palm tree. You can hardly see her there. It's a cozy vantage point. But Andrew, Vanessa's husband, was seated at a table against the opposite wall, far enough away to hear his conversation, but well enough to observe. And yes, Andrew was not alone at the table. He was already being waited on by her, the same blonde to whom Jenna had spoken. She wasn't wrong, it turns out. Indeed. The girl is quite attractive and looks at the man so attentively, so enthusiastically tells him something. And Andrew answered with a one-word look at the interlocutor, nodding with interest in time with her words. His eyes remained very anxious. Probably he was reporting to his mistress how his life with his wife and 3 children was late for him. Maybe even complaining that he had to carry someone else's child. All the complexes and stereotypes are not once tortured. Suddenly, again stirred up, raised their heads, and desperately jealous Andrew to this talkative beauty, and also hurt that those around him, including Jenna, were right. Never a man like Andrew would be happy with a woman like her Vanessa. He'd need someone brighter, more presentable like this blonde. Andrew suddenly hung his head, as if hearing something sad or frightening. The blonde put a hand on his shoulder gently and soothingly and gestured. The man covered her palm with his. They smiled at each other. Her eyes darkened at this point from her overflowing emotions. If it had been possible to write off this conversation as a business conversation before, it was definitely not. Andrew suddenly rose from his seat and moved toward the smoking room. That seemed strange too. Andrew, after all, never smoked and generally adhered to a healthy lifestyle. Nothing had escaped his spouse. Now she'll talk to him, ask him about the blonde. Vanessa doesn't intend to wait for tonight. And in such a situation, the man is confused, will not be able to come up with an excuse or lie to the effect of surprise. When he saw Vanessa, Andrew glanced at her indifferently at first. Something was wrong with him. Something subtly unfamiliar slid into the features of the man he loved. Was he so changed by the company of his mistress? And how could he remain so calm when he saw his wife at this very moment? Vanessa to the railing, into the man's angry gaze. Andrew raised his eyebrows in surprise, gazing into her face, and suddenly there seemed to be a flicker of understanding in his eyes. It was as if he remembered Vanessa and recognized her at last. The situation was becoming more and more incomprehensible. Andrew, can you explain to me what is going on here? Vanessa herself did not expect her voice to shake from the tears coming to her eyes. You must be Vanessa. Andrew smiled embarrassedly, or the woman, only now noticing the old deep scar on this man's temple and the tattoo on his arm. The man also seemed to be thinner than Andrew. Who are you? Vanessa breathed out. She shook. She grabbed the ledge of the wall to keep from falling. The man immediately and carefully supported her. His movements, his facial expressions, his facial features. Everything was exactly like Andrew's, and yet it wasn't him. Now that Vanessa was right next to him, she could see it clearly. It was probably for the best. It's probably for the best. The man smiled. I didn't know how to tell you about myself, even though I've been looking for you for almost a month. How? I've been living in your town all this time. Nina and I. She's a private investigator, by the way. She's the one who helped me with this search. She and I have been gathering evidence and proof. There's no doubt now. Now comes the hard part. Familiarity. I don't get it. It's not surprising. The story is so unique in its own way. Any indie movie could top it. I thought you were my husband. It's understandable. Andrew and I are natural copies of each other, twin clones. My husband is the only child in the family. Vanessa weakly objected. If Anna and Sam had other children, they would have told us about it. Vanessa knew it had taken the older couple a long time to become parents. Andrew is a very late and long-awaited child, and he was born alone. I suggest we go to the table. Victoria and I will tell you all about it there. I nodded weakly. The blonde flicked her eyebrows down in surprise at seeing Vanessa. But Nina apparently recognized her. At least, she immediately addressed Vanessa by name. This is a really incredible story, Nina said. It will change your spouse's life and yours, of course. It was Nina who began the story. A man who looked uncannily like Andrew, whose name, as it turned out, was James. Every now and then he'd insert his lines, add to it, correct it. In distant New York lived a large family of mom, dad, and 4 children. Neither education nor parental support the couple had. All their property was a 2-room apartment in a dilapidated 2-story barracks on the edge of town. It was a wooden structure, shriveled by time, an emergency dwelling. But the large family had no other home in sight. There was a catastrophic lack of money. The head of the family worked part-time where he could. Who is to garden about the flight? Who will help to re-roof? Somewhere he unloaded a truck at the store, in a word, a handyman. In the morning he would go out in search of a living. And in the evening he often came back drunk, but without money. The mother of the family hardly worked. She had no time to be pregnant or with another baby on her hands. Is it a joke? For 6 years of life together, the couple managed to produce 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. It would seem quite enough, given the initial conditions. Too much even. But the mother of many children had a different opinion. First of all, the children were paid an allowance. Secondly, having a baby in her arms, she could legally not work. Her husband all dreamed that when the younger wife will grow up to help him in making money for the family. But his other half had other plans. And in general, the woman loved children, especially when they are very small, touching, visiting as kittens, who glasses that smell so nice. Well, how to refuse herself this pleasure? In general, contrary to the aspirations of the head of the family, got pregnant his fella in the 5th time to trick around his finger on something safe days. Women can when they want. The spouse came to despair when he learned that he would soon become a father again. Pulling another one was too much. And then there were suspicions that there was more than one child under his wife's heart. That is suspiciously fast-growing belly this time. The mother of many children did not go to the ultrasound. There was no money, and she didn't register early, only to fray nerves in vain to go to the counseling center. No, she was an experienced lady. She knew that the most convenient way to surrender to doctors is on the eve of childbirth. But experienced acquaintances unanimously assured twins. The old lady on the 1st floor was a former midwife. It was 2 heads in the belly of the pregnant woman felt twins. I'm telling you exactly, authoritatively declared the neighbor. I am never wrong. The woman smiled happily, and her husband grabbed his head. There are twins here too. At that time, the father of many children found a good part-time job, tending the bushes in the house of a wealthy businessman, Chuck. Every dog in town knew him. He owned a chain of restaurants and cafes. The man was lucky enough to get a seasonal job with him. Paid well, no hard feelings. The work was not dusty, simple. And what a magnificent house. And the garden was a pleasure to work in. People live, but she didn't look happy to be rich. And the new gardener quickly found out why. Turns out, the couple couldn't become parents. Couldn't make it work. And there were some problems with the wife's health. The father of many children chuckled to himself. His husband would have such problems. Businessman this where only his wife did not take his wife, where she only did not treat. And no good. And this, it turns out, happens. One day the wife of the owner could not stand it and burst into tears right in the garden. Chuck clumsily consoled her, tried to find words. That's when the father of many children and the idea arose in his head. He waited until Chuck was alone and approached him with a proposal. You're having a baby. It's not working out. I got 4 on the bench. I got twins on the way. What are we going to do with them? We can't afford them. So maybe we'll give you the kids at a fair price. My wife's not registered with the doctors, so the babies don't even exist on paper. What do you think? Chuck was outraged at first, yelled at the gardener. But a couple days later, he called him in for a serious talk. It turned out that the businessman discussed the proposal with his wife, and she happily jumped at the chance to become a mother of newborn twins. That evening, the head of the family returned to his home barn in high spirits. He would make such a bargain and get rid of unwanted children and earn money. Besides, at least one of his descendants would have a human life. The man was even a little jealous of the unborn twins. Lucky kids. But his wife suddenly resisted giving the children away. They are my relatives. I feel them and I'm already waiting for them. I won't give my kids to anyone. Let them take them from the orphanage. Children in orphanages are alcoholics and sick people. They don't need them. We have babies. They're just beautiful. And then, what will these kids see in our place? And there's such a house, so much money. But the woman is stubborn. She wouldn't do it. Except her husband wasn't about to give up his plan. He told Chuck about the problem, saying that his wife did not want to part with the children. She was not even ready to give up one child. And then the businessman voiced a plan, which was under the power of only such an influential and rich man. At the due date of the young woman, in the local maternity hospital, 2 boys were born. The mother was a little surprised. There was something special about her. In the past, no one ran around like this in front of her. And here's so much attention, so much care. I guess it's because she's having twins. The babies are weak, anxiously, shook her head, the doctor. We need to get them to the NICU. Don't worry, the midwife reassured her. It's twins. With twins is always so. Everything will be fine. But the midwife was wrong. In the morning, the mothers of many children brought only one son to feed. The second. He hadn't survived the night, she was told. In fact, the baby was handed over to the Chuck family. This was the plan that Sam had proposed to the father of many children. That same night, Anna also arrived at the maternity hospital. Allegedly, she was going into labor. No one was to guess that the baby wasn't hers. They were discharged on the same day. The woman from the back barn and Chuck's wife. One was greeted by her husband and older children happy with the successful outcome of the event. The other had a grand discharge with music, balloons, guest photographers. Only a very limited circle of people knew about the fact that the babies these women were holding in their arms were twin brothers. And they kept quiet, because each of these people received a tidy sum and warnings. That's how it turned out. Nina finished the story. Andrew, by fate, fell into Chuck's family. James stayed with his blood relatives. Not for long, though. After a couple of years, all the children were removed from the family by the child welfare authorities. At that point, James was already an older brother. There was another girl born after him. So I grew up in an orphanage, James continued. I wouldn't say that my childhood was very hard. We had a nice, quiet life. Raised. We were educated. I graduated from the College of Mathematics and Computer Science. Now I work as a programmer. I have a family in the capital. A wife, 2 kids, an apartment. Everything is as it should be. Vanessa flapped her eyes, looking at James. That's the story. Really, it was like a fairy tale. How would Andrew feel about it? Good thing she'd found out. First, to prepare a spouse. It'll be a real shock to him. And the mother-in-law. They're old people. They need to be told too. A little more gently. Vanessa couldn't quite figure out how to feel about Andrew's parents' behavior. On the one hand, it was immoral and illegal. On the other hand, her husband was living in royal conditions, not wandering around in orphanages, and the childless couple was happy that they finally had a child. My mother visited me at the orphanage, James continued sometimes. I guess it was true that she loved children, she just wasn't a very responsible parent. She brought me cheap caramels, stroked my head. We didn't starve in the orphanage, of course. But I waited for these visits and caramels like manna from heaven, because it is important for every child to know that he is loved. And then I became an adult and independent. I didn't quit either. I helped her a little with money and tried to treat her. She drank heavily. Her father died a long time ago when she was young and her mother was stronger. But James couldn't perform a miracle to change his mother. All he could do was support her and watch her. As she sank, she lost her humanity. One day, the woman became seriously ill. Her liver started to fail. Not surprisingly, James visited her in the hospital, bought the necessary drugs, but the doctors did not give a single chance. It was a matter of days. The old woman realized this, and one day she told her son, the only one of her children who did not leave her, the story about twins, a rich family of a child from this wealthy, childless couple. The husband once still revealed the truth to his wife after another feast explained where he suddenly got a large amount of money. More than 20 years had passed since that moment, so the woman was not particularly impressed, but she remembered, of course, her husband's story. She was even happy for her son, who now lives like a prince and knows no need. She praised her spouse for such a decision. The mother wanted to find Chuck's family just to have a look at the second twin. But the businessman and his family, almost as soon as they got the baby in their arms, they went elsewhere. Chuck sold his business, his house, his possessions, and just kind of disappeared. As I found out, later he started a new life in a distant city, bought a completely different business, settled in a new place. I mean, right here. It's just incredible. Vanessa was experiencing a mixture of all kinds of feelings: surprise, joy, anxiety, and relief. Relief that Andrew was faithful to her. She'd been imagining things, but what shock was in store for the whole family? Andrew? I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear the twins' news. He's dreamed of having a brother since he was a little boy. It's the one wish his parents never got to fulfill. That's what I said when I heard my mother's story. She was gone the next day, by the way. If she had kept quiet then, she would have taken the secret with her. As it was, I now knew I had a twin brother and intended to find him at all costs with other siblings. I kept in touch all the time. They are all decent, people grown and educated, with families. And the twin brother, your exact replica, your natural clone, is a different story. James hired a private investigator. She got to work and very quickly got on Chuck's trail. It wasn't hard. The girls smiled. They moved away from Andrew's blood family, of course, but they didn't try very hard to cover their tracks. I found them quickly, and so we've been here for a month now. James smiled, looking around and gathering the latest evidence that this wasn't a mistake. Although the main evidence here is Andrew's success, we're practically identical. Even you and your spouse didn't realize what was going on right away. The final proof is ready. There's no mistake. The next step is introducing the brothers. That's the step James is hesitant to take. Nina sighed. And all of a sudden it just happened all by itself. Well, Vanessa smiled. So we'll all have a celebratory dinner tonight. I'll be home at 7. I need time to get Andrew ready, so come by at 8 o'clock. You know the address, of course. I'm sure you do. James shone.